Hi, it's Tony Williams with Quick Charge Power. Today we're going to talk about where we are in this modern era of electric vehicles and maybe where we're going. We all started this modern era in about 2008 or late 2000s with two cars that were revolutionary, and both of them were able to be revolutionary because of the lithium-ion battery. That was the technical piece of information that was required to make batteries that were dense enough and could power a car on a road kind of without compromise. But that first car that really came out as a mass market car was the Mitsubishi i-MiEV. And with all of 63 horsepower and 62 EPA miles, it wasn't a smashing success. They sold a lot of them in Europe. They sold quite a few, I think, in Japan. But it was kind of a dismal failure in the United States, and they stopped making it here in the last year or so, I think. So that kind of brings us to, what's there today? Well, General Motors, of course, in late 2016, came out with a great replacement for the Spark EV that they had previously, and that is the Bolt EV with a B. Not to be confused with the hybrid car, the Volt with a V. Why they named it that, I don't know. Maybe it's because every time it's discussed, somebody has to clarify which car you're talking about. But it has 238 miles of EPA range, and that was just absolutely mind-boggling to come from a car that, when most of its competitors at the time, except for cars like Tesla, were in the 80 to 100 mile range. So the car that kind of has set the world on fire in terms of EV sales and beats Tesla worldwide is the Nissan Leaf. With just in the last few days, they announced they sold their 300,000th Nissan Leaf. It's been totally redesigned for 2018. It's the first redesign. And next year, it's going to be available as a 225 mile car called an E+. But this year, for 2018, they should be getting to the dealers anytime real soon, but it's a 150 mile EPA rated car. The other car that kind of fits in this modern era of cars that I believe they're going to sell lots and lots of, and probably the one that will lead them all, is the Tesla Model 3. I just took delivery of my Tesla Model 3 just in the last few days, and I can tell you it is a knockout of the park. It's not to be confused with a luxury car. It's supposed to compete in that $35,000 to $55,000 range. And the car that they actually aimed to compete with wasn't another electric vehicle. It was actually gasoline cars. And that would be a car like the BMW 3 Series. So expect to see bazillions of those cars driving around. Right now they're offered with 310 miles of range, but you have to have a reservation to get it. And sometime late in 2018, it'll be offered with 220 miles of range. And again, you have to have the reservation to get it. If you ordered one today, you probably wouldn't get it for a year and more likely 2 years. So, where are we going to go here in the, we'll say, the near-term future? Well, of course, there's lots of other electric cars. Of course, Tesla is still making the Model S and the Model X. They're going to have a Tesla Roadster and some other cars. But, Tesla is really only does electric cars, and they do it quite well. But there's other car manufacturers that are kind of coming into the fold. Jaguar is going to come out with the iPace. It's supposed to have 220 miles of EPA range. It should be on the market sometime in this year, maybe next year. I was privileged to actually review that car in the design phase, and I can tell you that it looks a lot then as it does now, and I think it's going to be quite successful if they market it properly, and it has fast charging, which we don't really know, but I can't imagine it wouldn't. It would be crazy if it didn't. Aston Martin, a real low volume manufacturer out of the UK, is going to have the Rapid E, about 200 miles of range, we believe, and it kind of gets them into the market also. Not a lot known about that car technically, and they won't sell a lot of them, but it's really neat that these niche manufacturers like Aston Martin are also getting into it. Keya, a manufacturer from South Korea, is going to have a car called the Nero, 238 miles of range. They just announced that in the last 24 hours. Very, very similar in size and style to the Bolt EV manufactured by General Motors. And since most of those parts come from South Korea for that car, my guess is probably a lot of the parts are very similar. Maybe not exactly the same, but similar in design. The Germans, of course, are going to have more electric vehicles. The Audi e-tron SUV Audi says that will be a 300-mile range car. That 300-mile range isn't necessarily the EPA mile range. It might be a number used for the European testing standards, which tend to be kind of pie in the sky. Maybe 200 to 250 mile range might be what the EPA will actually give that car. And another car from the Volkswagen Group is the Porsche Mission E. That car, again, it's supposed to be a 300-mile range car. Maybe it'll be 200 to 250. We don't know at this point. But it'll be the first car that will use the truly fast electric vehicle charging that's coming out in the next few years, that will charge probably above 100 kilowatts up to as fast as 350 kilowatts. It's hard to say. I believe the Porsche will charge somewhere around 220 kilowatts at peak. But we'll see. There's no chargers yet to do that, but you know, that's the way the market is headed. There's some pie in the sky cars out there that, you know, like the Faraday Future. It's a Chinese sponsored venture that seems to be on its last legs. I'm not sure what will happen with Faraday, but at the Consumer Electronics Show here in Las Vegas just this week, a company called Buyten was announced. It's also backed by Chinese investors. The cars, to me, looked a lot like the Faraday Future. It made me ask, did they just buy Faraday? But apparently that's not the case. It's actually run by some guys that were ex-BMW managers who ran the EV group there for BMW. So yeah, it should have a pretty good chance, assuming it's got good backing. You know, the market is ripe for a good quality car to come online. So, you know, what's missing that we don't have? Well, that would be companies like Toyota. They still don't have an electric car. I don't know when they're going to get an electric car. They don't really like to talk about electric cars. They're very much focused on the hybrids like the Prius. And of course, in markets where they must sell electric cars, they're going to sell them in China and in California and other states in the United States that follow California law for zero emissions, and probably other markets and countries in Europe that will also have zero emissions. So the Toyota may have some kind of electric car, but don't expect them to do anything fantastic. They're working on solid state batteries, and you know, if those come to fruition sometime in the mid 2020s, maybe they'll make some kind of car. But they really want you to buy a hybrid today, and at some point way down the road, they are firmly convinced you're going to buy a hydrogen car from them. Ford, Fiat Chrysler, some others, you don't hear a lot of what they're doing. They're either way under the radar, but they don't have anything announced that's going to be substantial coming into the near future. And some other car manufacturers like Mercedes-Benz doesn't really seem to have a lot going on. They're going to make a B-class replacement. We don't really know all the details of that. And finally, the remaining group of BMW in Germany, they seem to kind of flip from if they're going to make hybrids or continue with gas cars or maybe make different EVs. It seems to change with the wind. But anyway, that's my summary, and I'm Tony Williams. Thank you very much, and we'll talk to you next time.